Hey, family. I am tickled black and gray, and happy and enthusiastically come to you saying good afternoon, good evening, or whatever it is, wherever you are in this space and place, watching this our podcast broadcast on these interwebs or internet. How about that? And I appreciate very much you taking the time and consider us at least one voice out here trying to fight the good fight and participate in the struggle to resist tyranny and oppression and to liberate and free all of us. But in particular, I need to free my own peoples. Amen. So I'm here tonight, and again, I get to do this to have these kinds of conversations with people I think are bright and smart and sophisticated and doing their thing in the way they do their thing. This episode is no different. I was talking to her just a bit ago, and I was just pleased that there was a person that was at the helm of this organization that was darker hued, and I just I was like, wow, they got somebody out there doing the work in this arena that actually understands what's happening, what's going on. I'll have her represent ourselves, but I am happy to bring to this platform Sister Tabitha Sookdeo. We talked about this name and everything, and who has a very vast background and is not new to immigrations. And we're going to talk Connecticut immigration. Sister Tabitha, come on into the room and greet the people.
Hello, good evening, everybody. Such a pleasure to be here and tonight. So my name is it's Tabitha or Tabitha Sookdeo. And, in the Caribbean, THs, at least where I'm from, there's not really like the th sound. And so Tabitha is, really what my mom calls me, but happy to be called by whatever people are comfortable calling me.
Oh, all right. So it's Tabitha.
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 There you go.
The TH. Okay. All right. I'm gonna get it together. So
you got it.
I don't like getting them people's names wrong. But listen, you call me just about anything. Don't call me late to where food is being served. That's about it. That's right. Well, I'm happy you are the executive director, and I would say still fairly new to the position for Connecticut Students for a Dream, otherwise known as C4D.
That's right. Yeah, I just started in October.
Right. And so could you for folk who don't know your organization, could you talk a little bit about its beginning? And I happen to know a little bit about its beginning with some folk, and in particular the twins that were out here doing tearing it up back in the early days, from Brazil, who kind of helped, in organizing and founded it, in and around the Obama administration, the second term particularly, when the DACA came to be. And so I'm gonna let you tell the story, because I know it in part, you know it in whole.
Sure, absolutely. So, the organization started about 15 years ago, and we're actually going to have a quinceañera. In a lot of Latino cultures, there's a celebration around turning 15, and so we'll be doing that sometime in the fall. And we'll definitely be sure to invite you, Bishop. I hope you'll be able to come with your wife. We'll have a lot of really fun dancing and celebrate all of the youth who are turning 15, between 15 and 16 years old. So, really, the organization started as a result of the Dreamer movement, and with the Dream Act, the narrative was that undocumented youth came to the country and so needed to be able to access certain types of resources because they were brought to the United States not by their choice. And that was really the narrative that started throughout the Dreamer movement. And so, we as an organization currently, we've been trying to move away from that narrative into talking about the fact that in order to be seen as fully human, it doesn't mean that you have to go to university, right? You don't have to be an exceptional immigrant. And so even though that's how we started, and kind of like what brought a lot of attention to undocumented youth, we're just really wanting to show our full humanity.
It's just like Zoom. We got to doing Zoom over the course of 4 or 5 years, and every time I got to push the button, all of a sudden I'm looking for the button. Anyway,
right. I get that, Bishop. Yeah. Absolutely. But I know you've been around. So a lot of the work that we did was around in-state tuition, right? Tuition equity, and then also being able to access institutional aid, right? So the fact that we as undocumented immigrants, the community pays taxes, and so therefore should be able to reap some benefits, including some aid for folks to be able to go to school.
That's right. And that work led into the kind of what I'm going to call broader conversation around immigrants and immigrant rights that led to ultimately some immigrants getting in some spaces getting documents, like a license, right? or some kind of registered, I am a registered person, here's my name, my address, all that kind of stuff. And then the declaration of sanctuary cities for a number of Connecticut cities in particular, and other organizations and institutions that had the conversation about what sanctuary means, and it harkened us back to days in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s, and even into the early 80s, where sanctuary communities was a thing, and so I was happy to be involved and in that struggle and in those efforts, a decade plus ago. In particular, and it has led us to, I'm remembering during the first administration of he who shall not be named on this show.
No comment.
During the first administration, Trump administration, that his first official act was to ban Muslims, right? And I remember being a part of a small group of us that went to the airport and said, "You're welcome here," and just as an act of resistance and defiance to what were clearly, kind of, outright, decisions made by the then administration. Talk a little bit about Sister Tabitha. Yeah, get it right. Yeah, get it right. Yeah.
You got it.
I'm a struggle, but I'm gonna struggle to get it right. How That work has led us, the core work of establishing C4D, and here in Connecticut in particular, how it connects to the broader work, both here in the state of Connecticut, but also in the country.
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. I think the fact that we are an organization that is led by undocumented youth, by impacted people, says a lot. We don't believe in clients. We don't believe that we're serving any clients, right? We believe that it's really up to us to determine what our futures are, right? We can take the power because we know that we have power. And so much of our work is making sure that folks know this inherent power that they have within themselves. And I think that young people, there's just something that happens when young people are able to realize that, because it just completely changes your life when you realize that. And so I was talking to somebody the other day. We were engaged in giving some testimonies during appropriations for Husky, right, for Husky coverage. And I said, "What high schooler do you know knows how to give public testimony, right, to the Connecticut legislature? It's really impressive. It's incredible." And then the person said to me, "Well, somebody who's had to grow up too fast." And it's true. So many of our youth, even me myself, my own personal story, we've had to grow up quite quickly as youth. And so I think that with being able to go to school in America, and I'll speak for myself. I know of the type of privilege that I have, being able to speak English, being able to have gone through the school system, the public school system, on the other side. Me, myself, being able to go to college. I'm also currently a law student. And so I know that there is an enormous amount of privilege that I have, and that I need to turn around and make sure that my community knows the power that they have. And so when it comes to the struggle in the state, I think that Connecticut as a place is somewhere that I have felt very grateful to live. When I first came to the United States, I lived in Florida, I lived in Tennessee, and those are beautiful states with beautiful people and better food than Connecticut. Love Connecticut, but Southern food is so good. But coming here, it has just been a privilege to see the ways that we can mobilize and organize ourselves as immigrants, because you don't really see that in other parts of the country. Or rather, I should say, you see people organizing, but are not as successful because the government does not allow for that space to occur. Now, fast forward to a national landscape. I think the things that we have been able to accomplish in Connecticut, especially as undocumented youth, has just rippled across the nation. I was a college student in Tennessee, and where I received my youth organizing training. To this day, they're still fighting for in-state tuition, and we always look to Connecticut as an example for how to pass legislation. So Connecticut has really just been a leader when it comes to the immigrant rights movement, and more specifically, the youth immigrant rights movement.
It's amazing to me. I've been here now almost 25 years,
Mm.
and we moved here from the Midwest, my beloved and our children, and to discover that Connecticut is one of the 13 original colonies that helped to make the forming of the United States of America. So there is a rich history that exists here. I had a friend and colleague say to me, "Do you know Connecticut law helped to create some of what we understand as civil rights law?"
Hmm.
So, that made me stick up, perk up a little bit, and then I went like, "Well, why did he say that?" So I went to get in the books, and folk who know me know I love to read a little bit, and I got books everywhere,
I see
everywhere.
them behind you right now.
Yeah, you don't see what's over here. You don't see nothing about what's over here. Uh, but what I came to find out, what my friend who was an attorney, by the way, was referencing, for example, that the law that was predicated upon the decision that was made in 1857 that said Black people have no rights that white people are bound to respect. That
Mm.
was the majority opinion, Roger Taney, who was the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court in the Dred Scott decision. That decision, in part, was based on the work that was done in the court case with Prudence Cranston. Now, Prudence Cranston was a educator and had a women's school in Canterbury, Connecticut, east of here. And of course, again, women getting educated, that's a whole nother matter. But in the early 1830s, she decided to educate Black young women. And when she did that, the town of Canterbury, they said, no, no, no. And they ran her out of town, in essence, and arrested her ultimately. And she spent a little time in jail and was brought up on charges and stuff in 1830. And by 1833, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, they created a law here in Connecticut that said Black people from without Connecticut could not be educated in Connecticut. That ultimately that law went away because Black people did receive education largely by themselves. But it was that case law that was used in the Dred Scott decision, which, if we would tell the truth, much of civil rights law is built on. Wow. So only to your point that Connecticut has been a leader, both in good ways and maybe not so good ways, right? And so we have this opportunity. That's one of the reasons I wanted you to be on, so that we could talk about the ways in which the immigrant rights work that your organization, along with others, are leading the way. We were recently, I guess a week or so ago or more, at a rally that you and your organization and a number of groups called us together so that we could begin. It was the launch of strengthening the Trust Act. Could you talk a little bit about the Trust Act?
Sure, absolutely. So we have been pushing for the enforcement of the Trust Act. So the Trust Act is already a law that exists here in Connecticut. And what it does is that it prohibits local law enforcement from cooperating with ICE under specific types of circumstances. So unless somebody, if an undocumented immigrant has an A or a B felony, then the police are not supposed to work with ICE to detain somebody, right, and to hand them over to ICE. There are a number of different provisions that are within the Trust Act. And we have seen and we have heard about Trust Act violations, and they've especially come to our attention with increased enforcement under the new administration here in Connecticut. And so what we are really wanting to do is to ensure that there is enforceability. At the moment, if there is a Trust Act violation, so let's say an officer or a probation officer gives over information about an undocumented immigrant to ICE, for just like either no reason or because they think that somebody ought to be deported and they don't have an A or a B felony, that is a clear violation of the Trust Act. And so we have seen a court case, speaking back to the law, we saw a case that went up to a federal court because immigration law is a federal matter, right? And there was a clear statement that the Trust Act did not have a private right of action, right? There was no basis for redressability, and the judge didn't think that that was the intention of the legislature. And so, we are really wanting to ensure that that this legislation has teeth. Every legislation that comes out of Connecticut, that comes out of the Capitol, should have an enforcement mechanism, because if they don't have that, then it's just for show, it's just performative. And one of the things that we believe can be powerful in stopping the mass deportation machine is the Trust Act, right? There's not a lot that we can do to prevent families from being ripped apart. So much of immigration is a federal matter. And so even though there are checks and balances, for the most part, a lot of what's allowed is up to the executive branch. Now, and that's within agencies. So Connecticut, right, there is a certain amount of sovereignty, right, that Connecticut has. And it's interesting that we're talking about states' rights, because that's not really something you would think that we would be talking about. And I digress about states' rights, but this is really one of the only ways that we can do it. Because what we're nervous about are provisions that are similar to 287G that we saw quite frequently in the South, particularly in Georgia, where local police were deputized to detain people and to deport them. And that's not what we think the Connecticut police should be used for. There's no, when we think about our constitutional rights, the federal government cannot commandeer state resources. And so police are state resources, right? Our police, they should be caring about ensuring that communities are safe, that they are trusted messengers, that somebody who is, no matter their immigration status, if they're facing a crime, if they're facing domestic violence, they should feel safe to go to the police for assistance. And the last thing I'll say too about the Trust Act, we haven't really talked about this as much, but there is certainly a racial component to this, right? We know that our Black and brown folks are disproportionately affected by random police stops, right? By just police enforcement activity, even if it's not, it's not proportional. And so what that means is that if somebody is a Black undocumented immigrant, they're more likely to have interactions with the police and therefore more likely to have ICE activity. And so that's also something that I'm hoping to bring attention to.
Yeah. So let's talk about immigrations, and make the direct correlation to what you just named within the context of the Trust Act. Historically speaking, it is the job. Here was one of the divisions of labor, if you will, as the United States was formed, that things that related to national security, all right, border enforcement and such, were gifted to the federal government, while local public safety was gifted to municipalities and states, right? So what you named is in the Trust Act. We did do some work, a dozen years ago or so, in saying, listen, we don't have to do the federal government's job. They do their own job. Let's concentrate on what it is that we need to do in our local municipalities within the context of this state, and to empower municipal leaders, mayors, town persons, to say, hey, we don't have to do that. That's the work of the federal government. But what you've just said is that the federal government has duly deputized or commandeered local law enforcement, for example, to serve. In fact, what I'm hearing is that other departments and their enforcement mechanisms and arms are being deputized as immigration's customs, enforcers, and they've been duty deputized. They work for another department, but they're over here doing ICE work, right? And that's what the Trust Act, in some way, at least here in Connecticut, is to say, nope, that's not what you're here to do, and let us help you understand what the role is of local public safety, and I'm saying that, using that in the broadest of context. What you got to say? What you got to say about that? Am I on the right?
You are on the target. Absolutely. I think the other thing to bring attention to as well is with data, and that's what we're also pushing for, just data security. I mean, it's like the wild, wild west out here when it comes to data and accessing data, So we're particularly nervous about data within the DMV, right? Being able to have a driver's license, even if you're undocumented, it provides a source of autonomy. You have to be able to drive to go to the grocery store. to pick up your kids from school. They're just very basic things that people need to be able to do. It's also helpful to have identification, right? It helps people to come out of the shadows and to be part of society. And so you have this group, data of drive-only licenses. And so what happens if the federal government subpoenas the DMV and they want all of the drive-only license data? So that's something that we're looking into. The same is true for Department of Social Services, right? All of the Husky data, we've been able to push for coverage of Husky for undocumented pregnant people, and also for folks under the age of 12 years old, right? So what about all of that data? So as part of the Trust Act, with this newer revision of the Trust Act, we're trying to push for data provisions as well. And the last thing I would say too is to ensure that the Trust Act doesn't only apply to police, but that it applies to all agency staff members. I mean, we have seen things within, Project 2025 of the new administration potentially trying to get to state agency staff to turn over information. And so we really want to make sure that that's not something that is allowed here in the state of Connecticut. So we have a lot of work to do, truly, truly so much to do.
You named it. We're going right there. Project 2025. Listen, that was developed, Heritage Foundation, which is a right-wing think tank, along with other players, published a huge volume, 900 plus pages of blah, 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 blah plans that if the Trump campaign and President Trump won the election, here's what they would be working on. Now, of course, he said and made the claim, I don't know anything about it, blah, blah. That was a lie, because right away, they're going right from the playbook and doing that. Can I just for a moment talk a little bit about what they laid out to us over a year ago and published it? Listen, this stuff was free 99. You can go on the website and just download it. Free 99. And I got stuff to say about it, but it seeks to reshape America's immigration landscape off the rip drastically. Now, under the guise of the rhetoric you hear, national security and economic protectionism, right? That is to say, somehow or another, and we've heard this language. The criminals are coming in here, and they're criminals, and I even heard a Connecticut state legislator say, we want to expand, not only A class, B class felonies, but also C class felonies. What? Anyway. These draconian, tyrannical measures are aimed to curb, immigrations and to fortify the nation's borders, right? That's the language used. So, for example, they want stricter border controls and increased deportations. Now, let me just say, for the record, it was something that I did not appreciate about the policies that were put in place several administrations ago. So I want to say, first off, just for the record, so that I'm clear and consistent, I had something to say then to other administrations on the left side of the aisle, if you will. Now, but that's that. I'm gonna keep going here. Secondly, to reduce or the reduction of legal immigration. So not to expand how people move from undocumented to documented workers. How do you move from coming here, just like the Statue of Liberty stands as a symbol of, bring us your tithe, all that rhetoric and language. We're now hearing, no, we don't want you here, right? And you hear that almost verbatim, just like that. The elimination of sanctuary cities. And I would add to that, even 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 while they don't even know what that was in the first place. I'm hearing all kinds of stuff, and that's not what the conversation was about when we were talking about the declaration of sanctuary cities or sanctuary institutions or sanctuary places and spaces or sanctuary in the context of religious spaces and communities. Here were safe harbors. We were much more talking about what it means if you want to get biblical, and I will because I can. We were really talking about cities of refuge, where the safe harbors were places that we can say, okay, time out. Let's figure out a way in a relatively safe way to figure out what's next for individuals and families, right? But this rhetoric of the elimination of sanctuary cities, and then this this burned me up right here. The elimination of birthright citizenship. Now, I'm a bit of a wonk, so I like policy. So I'm a bit of a policy wonk, just a little bit. And I'm also a bit of a scholar, and so I kind of like, having some conversations and pressing some arguments for the purposes of understanding and deepening our understanding of things. And I believe iron sharpens iron. So you got something to say on it, I got something to say on it. Your mind, my mind, our minds together, we're better minded, having had the conversation. That's how I operate, and that's where I come from. Now, so with Project 2025 and what now is very clear, the nature and the move toward immigrations and really the deployment of ICE and other law enforcement agency to do the bidding, to get rid of to hunker down on these border restrictions, immigration control, get people out of here, deport them, get them out, send them back to where. I love this conversation. You black people go back home. Well, if you were to tell me where's home at, first of all, if you just, you tell me where that is, and I might be ready to go right now because you stink, and I don't like being around stink people, right? I might be willing to go, but tell me with the multiplicity of peoples I'm from, where that might be, and I might be willing to do that.
Right, where you think it's from.
Right. But then thirdly, the good hard work that many have done around sanctuary cities and this whole idea of sanctuary, to the point now we in the work and in the movement we're moving away from sanctuary because it's become such a hot button, a trigger for way past misconstrued notions and ideas of what it actually means, and then you just gonna eliminate the 14th Amendment of the Constitution. We just going
very casual.
We just going eliminate, and let me be very clear. The 13th, 14th, the 15th Amendment were for black people first. And so, that was as a result of a whole civil war that this country fought in the 1860s. So let's talk a little bit about Project 2025. And I'm going to say this, and some of my friends going to get mad at me or make feel upset. Please don't come for me too hard. But it feels like those folk on the left side of the aisle seem to have gotten caught just downright flat-footed around some of this stuff. When it was telegraphed, it was written down in the book. They talked about the book. Some of us went and got the book. We talking about it, but we didn't in the way that we needed to plan for a counter of the plan.
No, absolutely. It's truly shocking. I've read all of it, and it is just, for me, for the immigration section, I've been saying this a few times to people. It's like it's almost like a checklist. You just go one down the list, down, and people should be concerned. We are absolutely in a civil rights crisis, and we should be turning internally at ourselves and saying, what am I going to do about that? And I know right now that folks are really concerned about the economy, and there's this sort of narrative that is pitting economic freedom with the other, right? So for instance, if a state decides that they're going to stand for oppressed peoples, that then they're going to lose money. They're going to lose federal funding, and that's sort of what the mechanism is being set up for, right? And we see that in Project 2025. And so what's going to happen in the next 4 years is going to be testing our morals, and I just really hope that people can stand up for what's right, even at the risk of when it comes to money, right? Because we have a lot of power as people, and unless all of us stand up for each other, then it's not going to work, right? We have to be willing to put ourselves on the line, and by that I mean that it means that there might be suffering, there might be personal suffering, but what are people willing to do? What are you willing to do to stand up for your brother, stand up for your sister, when they're being attacked and when they're being oppressed? And for me, I come from a Pentecostal background. I come from what true social justice is, right? When it comes to right relatedness with each other, right relatedness with your fellow human, with nature, with God. And so for me, it feels like a very simple answer. But I know for folks, that's not the case. And so I just really hope that we feel called into to this prophetic imagination of naming what we need to be living into. And I find it hard to have those conversations with folks these days. And it's a scary time. It's a really scary time. But at the same time, I do see people rising up in places that I would not have expected. So I'm really grateful for that. And the last thing I'll say too about all of this that's happening around detention, and you named it, these amendments, so much of it, surrounded the freedom of formerly enslaved peoples. And you will see even within this detention and deportation machine, it's people of color who are being targeted. There've been reports of Native American people being picked up, of Puerto Ricans being picked up, and it's like at this point, it's just racial discrimination, right? How do you justify all of this?
Yeah. So what we're naming is the consequence of these really bad policies, and in many instances, let's be very clear. We're not even talking about the law. You're a law student. Executive orders are not laws. And especially when Congress has done the work of establishing, our law work. The executive orders are just that. They're policies. And then there's a mechanism around which the checks and balances of this so-called government, this representative republic, not a democracy, if you want to get down to the literal, we're not that yet. So how and in what way the consequences of some of this, just what I'm going to call bad policy, means for the human suffering, the cost and humanitarian cost and the danger to those who are already on the margin. So okay, we gonna make just some kind of I'm trying to be nice because I'm on these interwebs. So I'm trying to not to say
what you have to say.
Well, I can't. No, I won't do it. But let's just say this: it was an ill-informed conversation about Haitian communities and dogs and cats. In Ohio, to the point that them people in that particular town had to go almost to war because something was said in a particular context with no facts. Some of this they can just say anything, right? All right, but for me, it is the humanitarian cost, the human cost to policies like that. Family separation, which has been a deal all along the way. Again, we've been some 20 some odd years plus in a struggle for how this is played out in communities, and in particular communities of color, right? So again, here in Connecticut, one might say, we have immigrants and undocumented folk here, but not too many. But let me just say, we have a whole lot of diversity here, a whole lot of racial and national diversity here. We always have in Connecticut. And what it tends to be is those communities who are to the margin are even further marginalized. So find the woman with 3 children who is Haitian, who is darker hued, who's black, right? They are so far under, they're not even at the point of coming to the places where resources are, because they are operating. They're not sending their kids to school. They're so marginalized. I just the cost to labor, right? The shortages that are coming up. We're talking about the economy, the damage that does in the context of this. Economic contributions are immigrants contribute a vast majority, a vast, considerable amount of resource to our national economy. And let me just talk about here in Connecticut, to our state economy. All right. We were struggling during the pandemic with those who were the essential workers. Those essential workers who were working at, some of, our rest stops. And they were getting so jacked over, so mistreated, that we had to say something about it. And we showed up at several trying to find the right rest stop where the action is going to happen at. I can tell you some stories, Tabitha, about how to find, you have to get off at the one and then go back on the other side, because I was on the wrong side. I thought it was anyway. We found our way to help our family, our human family, the support of workers, 30BJ, and shout out to our sister Rochelle Palachi and others who helped us, who helped lead the way in relationship to labor. I want to mention one other thing: the consequence of what it means when we disenfranchise and when we put at risk these who are from other communities. We actually do damage to our own innovation, right? We do damage to our own innovation. Not only that, public health and safety, the eliminating of some of these policies means that more people are going to be at risk to further stuff. I can go on and on and on. Please get in this and respond. This your stuff. This ain't even my stuff. This your stuff.
No, absolutely. No, to your point about taxes, the number for Connecticut is $400 million of taxes that undocumented immigrants pay into this state alone. That's not even counting federal taxes. And that's a big deal. That's a huge deal when we think about it. And, folks will be like, oh, well, is that just state, sales taxes? No, there is a way for people to apply for an individual tax paying number. And that's how they pay their taxes. That's how my parents pay their taxes, right? And there's a lot of concern around that too, because there used to be a firewall around the IRS, right? And I used to say a long time ago that, if the federal government really wanted to know who was here, they would just need to subpoena the IRS and get all of those numbers, because it's not a secret that undocumented immigrants pay taxes. And so what's happening right now is that the new administration is literally asking for access to this data from the IRS. So why would you do that? We need this money to help to pay for Medicare, for Medicaid, for Social Security. And so many undocumented people are happy to contribute to this country where they live, because they want to contribute to their community, right? It's this is home for folks. And so why would you not want to be a good steward of your home? And so this new administration really just turns every single thing on its head. Nothing really makes sense anymore. And so I think a lot of this is trying to figure out what's the new normal. I explained to a couple of folks the other day that from the very first day of the inauguration, there was the rescission of sensitive location considerations, right? So when we think about churches, when we think about places of worship generally, we think about schools, we think about hospitals and health centers where, ICE has greater discretion to go into those places. And what does that mean for our people in these sacred places, right? I think schools are sacred. I think that going to the doctor is sacred. It is just, it's just awful to see. And we know that people aren't going to the doctor. We know that kids, like what you said, kids are not going to school. Throughout the state, in certain districts, we're seeing rates as high as 70% of kids not going to school. And that's a big problem because we know that when kids have the opportunity to go to school, not only are they able to learn English, but it's also a way for them to learn about this new society where they're living. And oftentimes be able to get food, right? Because a lot of folks are food insecure. And why would you take that away from a child? And it is a constitutional right for every child, regardless of their immigration status, to go to public school. And we see some of those things being challenged right now in Tennessee. There's a bill that would prevent from happening. And if that happens, this case would go up to the Supreme Court. Plyler v. Doe is what allows for undocumented youth to go to public schools no matter their immigration status. And that is something that is unique to the United States. I myself, growing up in the Caribbean, I wasn't able to go to school all the time. I was kind of in and out of status because it's just difficult in the Caribbean and in many places. And children should never be punished for wanting to go to school. And so I think for me, this is what resonates the most because I always had this hunger to go to school and I know what it's like to not to be able to go to school. And I'm talking about primary school, right? Like grade school. I'm talking about middle school. And then later on, when I came to the United States, after I graduated from high school, I couldn't go to college right away. I missed DACA, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, by a year because my family and I came in 2008. You had to be here in 2007. And so I just had this longing to go to school. And what I'll say to that too is that I put my head down and I was on the side of the street, like flipping signs, like the gold buyer stuff, like just doing what I needed to do, cleaning toilets, cleaning houses, to save up for like an English class at a community college. And so much of my family and myself, I just felt so dehumanized. And it's really why it is that I do this work, because I don't want people to ever feel this way. And I always want immigrant youth to know that they have just an enormous amount of power and enormous amount of resources at their disposal.
I want to just shout out some of our partners in this work. So I'm thinking of John Lugo and our friends at ULA. That's Unidad Latino Acción. I'm thinking about our friends at Make the Road. I'm thinking about our friends at Hartford Deportation Defense, along with C4D. These have been, for me, perennial partners in the work of advocating for immigrants. And of course,
Yes.
32 BJ and and 1199 and some of our union friends and partners.
Yeah, Hartford Deportation Defense.
Yeah.
Mhm.
HDD. So I want to shout them out and say, here in Connecticut, these are some of our friends who have worked tirelessly, Costanza and Miss Ruth and the folk that join in that work. Listen, I'm a faith person, and let's be very clear. I know you're a woman of faith. We can't say we don't have no work to do in this. That we don't have a part to play. We got pretty explicit instructions from Jesus in the gospel. Matthew 25 is pretty clear. Pretty clear. When were you in? When the question was asked of Jesus, when were you hungry? When didn't you have any clothes? When were you in prison? ICE, locked up. Right, Jesus, and then Jesus's response is, what you have done to the least of these, done to me. And so, and I would say other Abrahamic traditions, along with any number of our faith traditions that across the spectrum of faith, would have similar directives gifted by those leaders of faith, by God, that we can no longer somehow turn a blind eye to it. And let's be clear, here in Connecticut, I've been a part of the groups of folk who have done sanctuary stuff, who've provided a place of refuge for folk. And when it was clear in our federal understanding that churches were safe places. Some people of faith took the plunge and were willing to go out on the line and learn a lot about themselves. Yeah, learn a lot about themselves and learn, yeah, and admit that there was a little naivete in the midst of it. But let's be clear here. One of the things that we are out there and willing to engage, sisters and brothers of faith and conscience, is that there is a way forward, and we have to come alongside and find a way to do what's right, even in the face of these perilous times where we may not know. There's a lot of uncertainty, and there's a lot of oh my God, hair on fire realities, and there's a lot of fear. And I want to say that clearly. And I also want to say it is in these same times I'm reminded of Dr. King, and in his letter from a Birmingham jail, where he wrote on the newspaper in the margins, when his lawyer came in to give him the news, he would take the paper and write what became the letter from the Birmingham jail, where he was responding to members of the clergy who were in Birmingham, who said, Reverend King, Dr. King, you're taking us too fast. You're getting arrested, and you're getting people getting all riled up and everything, and we all on the TV, and we're looking pretty bad. Could you slow us down a little bit? We know we're not doing the right thing, but if we go slow and take another 150 years, we might get there. And Dr. King said, nah, no, it's not that bad people do, and I'm paraphrasing Dr. King. It's not that bad people do what bad people do. It's when bad people do whatever they do, and good people they say nothing. They just stand there, look away, or just absolutely don't do anything. Dr. King said we are bound together in a mutual garment of destiny. I love that part. He said, I can no longer, because they said, you're not from here. Why are you over here in Birmingham? He said, yeah, I'm not from here. But look here, I used to live right down the way in Montgomery, and now I'm in Atlanta, and I could no longer with not a clear conscience stay in Atlanta, and then get an invitation from my family to come join the work in Birmingham. That where injustice is anywhere, it's a threat to justice everywhere, right? And so it is for us, I believe, this moment now where we've got to decide, I'm gonna do what's right, even if it feels uncomfortable, even if it means taking some risk, to do what it is that our faith says we got to do. We got to be involved in what it might mean to help bring services, and bring, to let justice roll down like water. And righteousness not like as an ever flowing stream. That's great words. Oh, that's so powerful that the Bible can speak so eloquently. How do we live that out day for day? And I think your organization and others of our sisters and brother organizations that are standing in the gap, leading the way, and I say to you, Sister Tabitha, that we will do our part. One in voicing and using our voice and our pulpit and our platforms as best we can to say our work is your work. Our work is your work, and that students, Connecticut students for a dream, right? these students, you young people. I once was young, and now I'm old. And I think I hear the book said, David said, when I once was young, but now I'm old, but I've never seen the righteous forsaken, nor the righteous seed begging for bread. And I believe in part the reason that is a truth is that people respond in community. It is again, referencing Dr. King, it's a call to beloved community.
That's right. You preaching now, Bishop.
I know. I don't want to preach. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, y'all.
No, I love it.
But that's part of who I am. I did so get called to do just that. In our last few minutes, it says, tell us how folk who will listen to this can get involved.
Absolutely. So folks can go to our website. So it is ctforadream.org. And that's like 4 as in like the number 4. Would love to hear from y'all. Would love to have y'all plugged in. I think that this is a collective fight. And so much of what we're trying to do too is to broaden out the coalition to make sure that immigrants of all backgrounds are being heard, right? So again, like it's not just about Latina folks. It's about Asian folks, it's about African folks, it's about Middle Eastern folks. And I will keep saying that until I'm blue in the face, because I know that when we're all together, that we are so much stronger and that we have to look out for each other, right? It's not this is like a refugee versus like a quote unquote legal immigrant, quote unquote an undocumented immigrant thing, right? This is an immigrant thing. This is a people of color thing. This is a human thing. And so I just hope that, that folks can come together and just know that I'm really thinking of folks who are out there who think that they're alone. I hope that they know that they're not alone and that we're here not only just to help, but also to bring you into the fold as well. We want people to come and join us in this fight.
Yeah, you mentioned, and I got it to be true to my peoples. I got to mention the Africans. There are many, many, many Africans who are on this journey as well of being immigrants. It's funny. The mayor of this town I live in, Hartford, is a son of immigrant parents, and he's an immigrant. He wasn't born here, but has risen to become the mayor of this town, right? And that. In fact, his contribution, as in many, he's just one example of many who come to this country. You are one who come to the United States looking for a better life and start to carve it out. Your parents came here because they were seeking to try to live, right? And they wanted something better for their children. And who doesn't want that? Who doesn't want a better life?
At the end of the day, that's it. You want to save life for your children, right?
Oh my God.
A place to lay your head and enough food to eat. That's it.
That's right. And I believe that ought not to be a struggle bus. That in a country this wealthy, everybody that wants something to eat ought to be able to go down there. If you want a job, you ought to be able to run down there to the office and put your name on the list. If you want somewhere to live, we got enough housing built. We can find somewhere that's safe and warm to get you out the cold and out the elements to get you. And if you want a job, there's something you can do if you want it. Now you can stay out on the street and be, unhoused if you want it. But I believe that in this rich nation, what I just named, I don't care what you call it, ought to be there and available and a right for everybody, right? And so which means we got to share a little bit. And what's wrong with that? What's wrong with being community one with the other? Again, this is not far-fetched for me. And yet when you say it to many people, they say, well, Bishop, you're going too far. I hear it all the time. Wait a minute. Well, while I agree that sounds good, how practically does it work? It works just like this. You want a job, we ought to have a registry of jobs, people with these skills, and you go sign up and you fill out the paperwork and go on to work. It ought to be that simple. You want to go to school? From preschool through, You ought to be able to go to school, and we ought to be able to do that and provide quality education, decent, affordable, and sometimes free 99 housing. It ought to be there. It ought to be a way in which those who have, with just a little bit of sacrifice, and sometimes for many it's not a sacrifice at all. Now I know I'm talking pretty strong, and for some that's pretty radical, but at the end of the day, if we're talking faith, this is where, what is right and what is wrong. And I say it all the time, sis, there are just some things that are just right, and then there are just some things that's just wrong. It's just, you don't need nobody to teach you. You don't need no Bible to preach. You don't need no preacher to preach at you about it. That's some wrongness, and you're being ratchet. And so you gotta figure that out, right? And sometimes you got to tell the truth on yourself. That you may have that in your mind, but don't say that out loud. Your mom and them done taught you better. That's at least what my people would say. Right. Yours too. Right, yours right. Too. Mm-hmm. Yours too. Absolutely. So again, your website is
ctforadream.org. All
right. Listen, Sister Tabitha, thank you very much for spending this hour or more with us. I friends and family, as you're watching this, I urge you, and I plead with you to consider how you might get involved with this particular part of the work. For those of us of faith and conscience, it's unconscionable, some of the things that people are suffering. Tabitha and I were in a meeting on a few days ago where we heard some pretty horrific stories that are true. I know some of them because I have my own stories that match up with some of these stories about the vast suffering that people are enduring. And so we have a responsibility, and I'm calling for all of our friends, those of us who are lovers of humanity, to find ways to consider getting involved. Thank you, sis, for spending this time with us. Listen, y'all, I'm gonna be back at it doing the same thing. Tabitha, would you agree? Come back on this show?
Absolutely. This was fun. I appreciate you, Bishop. Thank you so much for the invitation, and I hope everybody has a great night.
All righty. You heard that now. So when I see her and she be like, "Oh, Bishop, I can't," I'm gonna say, "Girl, you promised me."
On record.
I appreciate you very much. Y'all, peace. We'll see y'all next time. All right.
Thank you.
God bless.